All right. Well, I'm super excited to welcome to the program here Joe from Puget Sound Abatement. What's going on? And Gabe, by the way, excuse me. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gabe, you welcome as well. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Before
Good
we
to see
just,
you again.
yes, sir. Before we just dive in, let's start with going back to the beginning and tell us, Joe, all about Puget Sound Abatement. But before you do that, tell us what you were doing like right before you actually started this company. What was it that you were up to before Puget Sound Abatement came into existence?
Okay, I'll take it back then. Uh, before I joined Puget Sound Abatement, I've been with the company 10 years or so as the general manager. Uh,
Okay.
Before that, I was just a jack of all trades contractor. I was the gopher, the tool guy. I started at the very bottom. I was the, go for the truck and get the sawzall, get the bags. I was the bottom guy, and I started at the bottom at a different company, and they didn't do abatement. We did residential though, and I really learned how to do the trade, and I worked my way up to estimator, and I worked my way up to operations manager, and I actually tried to buy that company before I came to Puget Sound Abatement. And Puget Sound Abatement had just started. They were about 9 months into their infancy of starting. And I tried to buy the company I was at, and it didn't work out. I was out of a job on a Wednesday. I got a call Thursday from the owner that said, I hear you're looking for a job. I had no idea who he was, how he knew me. I interviewed on Friday and I started on Monday, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. How long ago was that?
About 9 years ago, 9.5 years
Okay.
ago.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So you didn't actually start it, but now you run it essentially.
Yeah, I mean, they had a general manager and they had five employees at the time.
Okay.
Um, and I took over roughly about 14 months after that.
Nice. That's awesome. Tell us about like what is Puget Sound Abatement? What do you guys do? What do you offer? Who's kind of your ideal customer?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, first and foremost, don't know what abatement is.
Right.
So,
I was
so
gonna ask, yeah, what is that?
No worries. So abatement is the controlled demolition of hazardous materials. So we specialize in asbestos, lead, which is a lot more prevalent than people think in their homes. Really any home older than 1989 can have lead and or asbestos, specifically in industrial areas or the metropolitan surrounding industrial areas. And as you know, with Puget Sound and Washington, really, this whole state is almost essentially a giant seaport. We're surrounded
Right.
by the metropolitans that grew from the industrial areas. So we specialize as a hazardous demolition contractor to safely remove, and dust-free removal of hazardous materials. We also are a fully licensed demolition contractor, so we can do building knockdowns. Although, jack of all trades leaves you a master of none. So we like to focus primarily on hazardous material removal.
Got it. How does somebody know that they need that?
Well, that's quite frankly, that's part of the problem is nobody ever knows until they've either disturbed it, they've contaminated their home, or uh, luckily, if they have a contractor that has some, general awareness knowledge, they get it tested beforehand. But that's part of the problem we face in this industry is uphill is nobody knows that they need it because there's just not enough public awareness about it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And, again, excuse my ignorance, but I kind of had a general idea of what abatement is or what what you guys do, but that was helpful. To the level of detail you just went into. I didn't know it was as simple as that. So, do you find that you deal mostly with general contractors and those people are the ones that you're interfacing with? Do you interface with the general public? Like, how would somebody, once they learn, like, oh, shoot, I've got a problem, how they know to contact you guys?
Well, we deal with the public, we deal with contractors, we deal with commercial properties, and we deal with some government agencies as well.
Mhm.
as things are progressing in these modern times, a little bit more awareness, a little bit of that technology and that information is readily available. So it's starting to become a little more prevalent. You know, if you fall asleep too late at night, you see the ads on TV for mesothelioma lawyers. Um,
Yeah. Right.
that's a start. But now schools are really getting highly regulated. They have to have action awareness plans where every 3 years, every single material in the school needs to be inspected for its potential exposure hazard. A lot of multi-family facilities are starting to fall under the same requirements of having an inspection plan, and these are state requirements, whether it's HUD funding or other assisted living programs. They're requiring the control and really the awareness of it. So I would say we're kind of split, kind of, a third down the middle of contractors, homeowners, and then people that have, in some way, shape, or form, been affected by asbestos, whether it's their grandparents or an uncle or an aunt that has unfortunately, passed away from asbestos-related diseases. Those kind of people tend to spread the awareness in their circles, which it's unfortunate that helps our business, but it is also a vital thing to prevent that in the future.
Right. No, absolutely. And so I imagine when homeowners in particular, right? If I'm at my house and I figure out I've got an issue with either mold or asbestos or anything like that, right? And I end up calling you, walk us through like what's your process, right? Once you figure out somebody's got an issue, what can someone expect working with you guys?
Yeah, so you know, it really depends on the varying degree or which step that our customers are in their process. I have 4 fully licensed asbestos or adhera hazardous material building inspectors on staff. I have 9 state certified supervisors on staff that can pull air samples. So it really depends on and making sure that the next step's the right step, right?
Yeah.
Typically people don't know they need us until they need us, and it's already too late, or it's a pre-planning phase. So we want to make sure that an informed decision and at least an honest answer is important to make sure, yeah, that the next step in this project is oftentimes the most critical step, because nobody wants to throw away all of their possessions because their house got contaminated, or they've decided to scrape their own popcorn ceilings before their family moves in, and this new house that they purchased trying to save some money. There's a myriad of steps. So first we have to identify what step in the process are we at. Does it need
Hmm.
testing? Do we even know if there's asbestos material or lead containing material? A lot of people tend to overlook the lead, because it's 1979. No, they haven't had lead in years. Well, actually not true. There's even a study that just came out about hoses at your local hardware store that have over the allowable limit of lead containing in these hoses. So they used to joke about drinking from the hose, but that's a very real statement. And
Wow.
so we start with testing. Does it need air testing because there's already an issue, or does the material need to be identified? Once we can properly identify the material, then I try to help guide my clients in what the next step is. Can it be encapsulated? Can it be kind of stabilized to prevent additional exposure or prevent an exposure period? Or is it something that needs to be removed? And how do we remove it safely? Because different types of materials have different types of abatements.
Hmm.
The most common, at least in this area, is popcorn ceilings. People commonly associate that with asbestos, and they're pretty right. That's probably
Really?
the most, actually, that is actually statistically the highest chance of exposure is popcorn ceilings.
And it's just there's asbestos in the whatever chemicals they use to put that up, or how does that work?
It depends.
Yeah.
So with popcorn ceilings, the asbestos mineral specifically is used as a binder filler for the popcorn.
Okay.
Sometimes it's actually the popcorn kernels themselves. Sorry about that. And it's hand mixed. So when the contractor or whoever is applying the popcorn sealing, they mix it themselves. So it could be very heavy, it could be very light, it could have none at all. It is what we're combating is human error, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
it was so commonly used. Anything, like I said, older than 89, there's about a 50-50 split chance that any home has some form of asbestos in it.
So I figured this out, that I've got a problem. I give you guys a call. You're gonna come out and really just assess where I'm at, do testing if necessary, and then if it does need to be removed, or the abatement needs to happen, right? Am I using the term right?
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Yep. Walk us through kind of what someone can expect.
Um, the most common visual reference that I can kind of refer to is I don't know if you remember the movie E.T.,
Yeah.
where they have the house draped in plastic and
Yep.
it's a tunnel through the house. That is the most visually similar thing that I can kind of uh, really equate it to. So, an example with popcorn ceilings, we have to wrap that entire area from floor to ceiling in 3 layers of plastic. So it is a pretty intrusive thing into somebody's life to remove this. That's oftentimes why people go to try and do it themselves because, oh, it can't be that hard. But in reality, it's very dirty. And so we seal our environment in plastic. It is
Okay.
overlapped multiple layers. And then we install some negative air machines, some HEPA filter machines. My guys go in suits, respirators, full on, um, you know, uh, marshmallow suits essentially. And, we wet it down, we hand remove it. There's no mechanical tool removal. We're not allowed to. It's all by hand, it's all by elbow grease, including scraping the ceiling. And then we HEPA vacuum, wipe everything down, HEPA vacuum again. And then we have third party laboratories run clearance testing on the air to make sure that it is below uh, the regulatory limits.
So just kind of because I'm curious, what
Yeah.
happens if somebody does try to do this all on their own and they just start tearing stuff down? Like what are the risks, or what could happen?
So it really depends on the material, like I said. So asbestos comes in 2 different forms. What is referred to as friable and non-friable. Friable is the ability to crush, pulverize, or turn to dust by hand pressure. Non-friable is something that is mechanically pressed, mechanically made, like a floor tile. Some vinyl flooring is, non-friable. So that's where the asbestos exposure comes from. If the material is deemed friable, or you take a saw or a sander to it to make it friable, you now have fiber release in the air. And those fibers are roughly a 15th the size of a human hair. So they're so minute, and they're so buoyant in the air that it takes, in a perfect vacuum, it takes almost 96 hours for one fiber to fall 8 feet. And so you think about how incredibly buoyant and in that air is. And if you're sweeping or walking through that area, you're constantly stirring it up. And the incredible thing about asbestos fibers is that they're hooked like a harpoon. So once they get into your clothing, once you breathe them in, you can't really get those out. And mesothelioma or asbestosis, when it gets into your lungs, your body can't destroy the fiber. Uh,
Hmm.
it is almost aside from the cancer, it's a pretty incredible mineral, but it doesn't burn, it's chemically impervious. But once it gets inside your body can't break that mineral down. And so it encases it. And then it slowly encases the encasement. And now all of a sudden your lungs turn solid and you essentially drown, or your lungs harden. And it's probably one of the worst ways I can imagine to go, honestly. It's pretty terrible.
So it's not something to mess around with, it sounds
No,
like.
I would strongly not advise it at all. I mean, there are ways to do it safely, but oftentimes, some people
Yeah.
don't take that extra step to learn.
Sorry
Yeah.
to butt in, but one of the incredible things when I learned about it was the latency period of asbestos, how long it takes for it to kick in.
I mean, that's a great point. Latency period that Gabe's referring to is the onset of disease after exposure. And that is a 15 to 30 year period. So you can be exposed to asbestos and not even know it until 30 years later. And at that point, once you've discovered it, it's too late. And
Right, right.
there's been so many documented cases of parents, unfortunately, over the years, scraping their popcorn ceilings, and then their young child who's closer to the ground than they are is obviously in a more dusty area, are more susceptible to exposure. And some of those individuals, learn that they have asbestosis at 35 years old or 40 years old. And there's nothing you could do about it at that point.
Hmm. What would you say has been like the biggest roadblock or challenge that you guys have had to face in this business?
Honestly, aside from the awareness aspect of it, is probably the stigmatism that is associated with it. Um, we've, we could take all the precautions we want, but the word asbestos still scares people. So
Mhm.
when you see people in marshmallow suits and you see people in respirators, we have nosy neighbors and people that um, assume kind of the worst.
Right.
And so the stigmatism associated with that is we're oftentimes an afterthought in projects. So people are already upset that they have to add to the budget, or it's something that's an inconvenience or a roadblock. So the stigmatism around it is, we're oftentimes pegged as the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's if it's an unexpected thing. How what sorts of things have you done to overcome that?
Well, a smile always helps,
Yeah.
but an honesty, integrity, and I'm not willing to cut corners, and Puget Sound Abatement's not willing to accept a single dollar to compromise the safety of not only our customers and their families, but also our employees. We have a clean track record, a clean L&I safety inspection record for the last 7 years. I haven't been fined in 7 years, which is something I, you know, really hang my hat on. And not many companies say that, but our commitment to excellence when it comes to safety is we do not compromise. And a lot of people, once they actually see the finished product, tend to really understand it a little better.
That's good, man. What's been the most like rewarding aspect of being in this business for you?
Knowing that I'm able to, or at least Puget Sound Abatement is through some of our standard business procedures and the way that we stand really behind our work and behind our integrity is, I would say, the most rewarding aspect of it is being able to share the information with somebody and prevent them from making a drastic life-changing event. Um, you know, just having an open conversation, whether it's home shows or talking to people like this, or even answering the phone on a weekend just to answer a question to a customer that calls in before they make the drastic decision to scrape their own popcorn ceilings. Um, that's been rewarding because I've seen the damage it can cause,
Yeah.
and being able to everybody's going to make their own choices, but if I can help inform you to make the best decision possible, then I've done my job. That's all I can do.
Yeah. So I imagine if people are listening or watching and wondering, okay, so how do I even know? Like, what are some things that homeowners can do to kind of check and see if they may have a problem, if they may need you to come take a look? What are some signs or things that they can look for to know that it's worth having you guys come out, take a look, run your tests, etc.?
So that's a great question. The unfortunate aspect with asbestos is there is no telltale signs that say that it's asbestos. You can't see it. Just because your popcorn ceiling has sparkles in it doesn't mean it's asbestos, but there are some materials that are commonly associated with asbestos, whether it's flooring tiles. So it's just being aware, but flooring tiles like the 10 by 10s or the 9 by 9 hard ceramic flooring tiles that you usually find underneath your carpet in the basement, those are commonly asbestos. Any white old boiler wrap or pipe wrap that looks like a plaster of Paris almost,
Mm-hmm.
is almost pure asbestos. That's typically like a 60 to 80% containing asbestos. But the unfortunate thing is anything else we can presume all we want, but it's safe to presume that everything is until you have it surveyed or tested or at least have an inspection. But there's really no telltale signs as far as asbestos goes that gives it away. I stick to the general rule. You heard me say it earlier. 1989 is generally the accepted cutoff. With federal standards, Washington State requires any home, whether it was built yesterday, to be tested. That's a Washington State law, but federally, 1989 is generally the acceptable thing. When it comes to lead, paints have that technology has increased so drastically. Everybody thinks paint is paint, but over the last 40, 50 years, paint has really changed, whether it's bonding or reflective or it's R value. But paint that is chipping or bubbling, especially on an exterior, is typically indicative of a lead-based paint.
Got it. Awesome. Well, when somebody does need to get a hold of you, what's the best way that people can find you online? They can reach out to you and get some help.
Yeah, so like our website, PugetSoundAbatement.com. We have an online contact form that comes directly to my estimating and building inspector department. They can simply fill out the questionnaires. Does it need to be tested? Do you not are unsure? It's kind of a self-paced, self-fill out form, and somebody will contact you within 24 hours. Or we are in the process of revamping some of our social media as well. I want to put out some informative things, but for now, the best way to contact us is, through our website. Is again, PugetSoundAbatement.com. We just redid it. It's pretty easy. There's a contact you form and there's some FAQs. So if you do have some general questions, there are some general questions that are kind of the most common.
Awesome. Joe, this has been great, man. I appreciate
Yeah,
you taking the time and sharing, and I certainly learned a little bit today.
well, that's all I can try and do, sir.